Hey babes, thank you for joining me. My name is Nadia Sayapin. I am the author of this book, The Rebels, which is basically Red Dawn with women. I'm here to read the next chapter, chapter 24. Just as you know, I do this all without any editing whatsoever. I spend a bit of time trying to make sure my lighting is semi-decent, and that's about as much. Oh, and I might go and hit pause once in a while. That's about as far as I go. The reason being because I am reading this book, one, because I cannot afford professional audiobook reading, and two, because I'm reading this for a friend of mine who can only use audiobooks, and she enjoys seeing my expressions. So, if you've decided to join me and decide to stick around, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. If this is your very first time, may I suggest going and finding the prologue, because we are in the middle of the book. As I said, chapter 24, it's not going to make a whole lot of sense. But if you're coming back, I'm glad to have you here. So, shall we get started with chapter 24 of The Rebels? About time you assholes got here, I growled, crawling into the truck. Not you, Dereva, you're a sweetheart, but you! I fixed Phoenix with a glare. You're an asshole! Just before dawn, the drizzle grew into outright pouring rain. Unwilling to run the risk of running into Steve again, we'd been huddling under some drippy trees since mid-morning, waiting for our ride out of town. Good to see you too, honey! Phoenix rolled her eyes. How was your trip? Wet, River grumped, then sneezed. What's with all the activity around here? Dereva asked. We've been seeing trucks and tanks patrolling all morning. Nothing? I tried. Ha! Nothing my ass! Phoenix turned around in her seat so she could face us. Talk! Fine, but we're not talking about Kitten until we get back to the bunker. I'm not telling that one twice. I glared at Phoenix, wiping my nose on my sleeve. Whatever. What happened to you guys? I was nearly jumping out of my skin. River relived the long wait. How did you survive all those long hours? She asked me. I shrugged, smiling slightly. Took a nap. Whatever. If you don't want to tell me how you stayed sane. I merely gave her my best Mona Lisa smile. When River recounted the explosion, Phoenix grinned widely. Wicked! She gave a bemused River a fist bump. It's your first explosion, Phoenix explained happily. Did you get any, Steve? 3, 2 outside, 1 inside. Phoenix's eyes widened a little at River's tone. So it wasn't just me. Phoenix arched an eyebrow. Knew him personally, did you? River nodded. I broke the silence. I'm glad you had the foresight to blow him up, rather than try to attack him with your bare hands like some people. I think she'll do just fine as our go-between. Though, I added, turning back to River, why the hell didn't you get out while the getting was good? I recognized that, Steve, and I couldn't. So I improvised. I shrugged and nodded. Good enough. Improvisation good, dying bad. Since she'd successfully improvised and I wasn't dead, I decided to call this a win. Sorry about that. Phoenix opened up enough to say that she'd have gone batshit crazy waiting for a chance to make her move. Now I was doubly impressed. Kestrel's sessions were doing wonders if Phoenix could admit a lack in her personality. Maybe we could get her to start up another group for the fighters. River finally remembered that there were 6 Steves in the patrol and admitted that she had no idea what happened to them. When they badgered me, I shrugged, uncomfortable. I happened. I dozed most of the ride back, content to wait until we got back to the lair to hear how the scavenging went. Once she finished telling her part of the story, River became dead silent. Every time I woke up, I saw her staring out the window, tapping out a little rhythm on her leg. The moment Dereva turned the truck off, River hopped out and walked straight to Kestrel. She didn't say a word. They both headed into the trees. I'd noticed whenever anyone was stressed, anxious, afraid, we all went into the trees. I had a favorite rock maybe 20 minutes uphill and a little north that gave me a good view that I never told anyone about. I assumed that most of us had a similar place that made them feel safe or helped them put things into perspective. I know they talked about things, but they always stopped when I got too near. The women slid quietly into the trees, barely making a rustle, and I smiled slightly. Training had finally become habit. Dereva flung a piece of camouflage over the truck, and we helped pull it over and around. Just because we hadn't seen any planes didn't mean Steve didn't have another way of monitoring from the sky. As soon as her truck was cared for, Dereva went in search of her brother. A routine now. First, she cared for the vehicle, then found her brother, then she hunted down a hot meal or something to drink. I think her personal aesthetic was feminine with a grease-stained rag. She wore it well. Turning away from the task, I breathed deeply, scenting the fresh air. Some things are forever imprinted on your memory, so ingrained that a single scent can take you back to a specific feeling, place, or time in your life. The scent of pine in freezing air does that for me. Footsteps and a lack of rustling clothing told me Eleanor approached. The long skirts she favored while at the lair were so much quieter than our pants. The only times I'd ever seen her in pants was during training. "How did everything go?" Eleanor asked, looking into the forest. "River ran into an unpleasant part of her recent past," I said, "but I think she dealt with it rather well." "Meaning?" Eleanor waited with a raised eyebrow. "She blew up one of the bastards from the brothel," I explained bluntly. "Oh." Eleanor nodded. "I think I know which one." "Good." At that moment, Anansi burst from the lair, trailed by Sirius. "Captain!" he shouted, waving excitedly. I smiled as his kinky mop of hair flew around his head. "You gotta see what we got! I think we can make a better pump now!" "Hold on, short stuff," Sirius neatly collared him. We've got to go over the mission, find out exactly what happened. If you show her all the cool stuff now, we won't see her for a week. So it'll have to wait until after dinner." "Can I sit in on the meeting?" His black eyes, partially hidden by hair too long, beseeched her. She sighed, then looked at us. "It won't all be pretty," I warned him. "I know." His gaze stayed steady on me. "But how am I supposed to figure out how I can help if I don't know what's going on?" Phoenix shrugged. Eleanor looked to the heavens for help, and I nodded. "If you get nightmares, I want you to talk to Kestrel, okay?" "Already got nightmares," the boy fired back. "Then go find Seahorse and meet us in the useless room." "We ended up making several trips," Phoenix recounted, finger tracing the raised map in the useless room. "So far, Steve isn't looking too closely at their own trucks, so we just kept on going. Like the kids said, we've got a lot of parts. We cleaned out Silverton's Napa as best we could, then we moved on to Mount Angel." Mount Angel was a cute German tourist trap and the next town over from Silverton. Where Silverton had 100 churches and 3 bars, Mount Angel had 3 churches and 100 bars. Or so the story went. "Plenty of stuff for pads, and we even found pads and tampons in a couple Mount Angel stores," Phoenix continued. "We feel," Amana said, looking at Eleanor, then back to the table, "that the pads and tampons must be safe para misiones, cause they are muchos más pequeña." "Smaller," Eleanor translated. She had a slight smile on her face as she watched Amana said. "The rest of the time while at the lair, everyone will use the larger bulky pads that we'll make. Everyone will also be regularly scheduled for wash days." Imparting the news that I brought back from Salem was a lot less pleasant. Phoenix raged when she heard about Corey and gave me a look that said she was 2 steps away from blaming me for it. But Amana completely derailed her. The younger woman simply put her arms around Phoenix and held her. "It was no your fault," she whispered. "There is only one group responsible, and we will make them pay." After the storm passed, River and me took turns giving out the information. We managed to find the locations Kitten told us about on a detailed map of Salem, marking them with little pins we found nearby. Anansi and Dereva sat quietly, soaking in everything, watching us all. It was a Bit unnerving being the focus of so much concentrated attention. And what news do you have for us? I asked Seahorse and Sirius when we finally finished. It starts like this. Seahorse got up and gathered a few pins in front of the table map. I hold up on a hillside overlooking, I checked the map, Will Hoyt Road with Seahorse and Fox. We monitored one of the routes, pinpointing the best place for an ambush. While we waited for Steve to come back, I pondered the girls' opinions about the news of the retaliations. They were almost unanimous that inaction would be more disastrous than the results of acting. The sole holdout was Jew, who felt that life, at any cost, was more important than the quality of that life. I leaned forward, resting my weight against the tree I straddled, and the only thing preventing me from sliding down the hill, and tried to figure it out. For the girls, this issue was black and white, no doubts. I shook my head, irritated. Philosophy was never my strong suit. Best to just deal with the tasks in front of me. At the moment, that meant making an entire patrol disappear without a trace. No smoke, no truck, no bodies. No sooner had I come to my conclusion than the tree next to me quivered slightly as Fox scrambled down. Steve had just re-entered Molalla, the fourth night in a row they'd only done a single day. For 3 weeks we'd monitored them. They went out for a single-day patrols for 5 days, then one overnight. Seen enough? The teenager asked. I nodded, then pointed to where the road passed between 2 shallow slopes dotted with trees. The location was outside the city limits, right before no man's land of the country. Right there seems like a good idea. I looked up to Seahorse, my eyebrows raised. As the only person on our crew to actually participate in real combat and planning, her opinion mattered most. That'll do. I smiled slightly, pleased. Maybe I was figuring things out a little after all. My advice is to hit them in the evening. We'll have more time to deal with the aftermath, and if there's any smoke, it won't be as visible. Tomorrow night, then? Tomorrow, yes, sir. I let the sir pass. I got tired of constantly correcting her. I also had the sneaking suspicion she did it because she thought it was funny, but I was too afraid to ask. We felt comfortable enough for a little quiet conversation on our way back to the GMC that Dereva, as always, watched over. Girl never let me drive my own truck anymore. Does it seem weird that most of the patrols we found are in the north? I asked Seahorse as we walked. She considered the question. It's reasonable. They seem to be looking for people who've slipped through the net. As the area north of Salem is the most populated, that would be where most of the patrols should run. Either that, or we haven't been able to spot the ones in the south, Fox said brightly, a stray lock of hair peeking out from under her brown beanie. As the one with the most noticeable hair, Fox always kept it covered, lest Steve spot her and us. Either way, Seahorse continued, we have a target and we need to hit it. Hard. Send a message. Yes, sir! Grass and leaves perked up under our first cloudless sky in weeks on the day we hit back. We'd spent the day placing people, and most of us were out. Amana stayed at the lair with Moana, Cub, Lightning, and Thunder. The sisters were absolutely banned from further action. For one, they were still too fresh. For another, I'd caught them trying to egg Storm and a couple of others into a game of Russian roulette as a way of proving their bravery. I had a heart attack. The sisters were benched until further notice, and Storm, High Tide, and Jewel all had the shittiest jobs for 2 weeks for not telling anybody the sisters were that unstable. Eleanor, strangely, insisted on coming with us. As a Christian woman, I hadn't expected it of her, but she wouldn't hear otherwise. She'd even been training with a handgun and had learned basic hand-to-hand for this occasion. Eschewing her usual skirts, Eleanor donned pants and boots with the rest of us, and, in fact, crouched not 10 feet from me. I stretched my neck and flexed my shoulders, attempting to work out the kinks before shit hit the fan. Across the road, Seahorse and Sirius led the other group. We hid in the grass, and Seahorse showed us the best way to camouflage by picking local vegetation and sticking it through belt loops, into collars and hats, and even into our boot tops. I was festooned with grass and twigs from the mountain ash I crouched under. We'd positioned Phoenix high up to act as our sniper. Seahorse called her God, which Phoenix liked and made Eleanor frown. The quivering grass in the grass that had nothing to do with the breeze caught my attention. The girls were getting antsy. Steady, people. I kept my voice low so it wouldn't carry down the hill, but loud enough that the fighters could hear. Remember your training. We're all about skill around here, not luck. The ambush went. Well, it went. Watching the truck approach, I tensed up. Seahorse and River were down low with the largest caliber rifles we had, ready to stop that truck in its tracks. Not yet. Wait for it. Yes. A fraction of a second later, the booms echoed off the hills around us as the rifles fired a split second apart. The truck rolled to a stop, a little bit past where we'd wanted it, but close enough. The higher crack of Phoenix's rifle bounced around the hills, and the gunman on top of the truck collapsed, sliding back inside. Steve, those assholes, didn't send another gunner up or open the doors and roll out in some formation. No, they had to be clever bastards and launch grenades out the open top. Cover! I shouted as I kissed the dirt. Across the road, Sirius could be heard roaring at her group. The first explosion went off to my left, and the concussion deafened me. Self-preservation kept my head down as the explosions rocked the ground. A line of fire raced across my lower back, just above my butt, and as suddenly as that, it ended. I popped to my knees and nearly cut myself on the piece of shrapnel sticking out of the tree next to me. The back of my pants let in a waft of cold air as I lined up my sights on the truck. Steve took advantage of our stunned silence to attack. I liked these pants! I bellowed, opening fire. The sight of bullets kicking up the ground around the truck was the only indication I had for nearly a minute that the others followed suit. Nobody froze, and that was the most important thing. I smiled tightly when my hearing slowly returned, never taking my eyes from my target. The 10 of us involved in the fighting had achieved a competency that satisfied Seahorse, who'd set the bar high. We knew we could hit our targets, and now it was just a matter of learning how to shoot at people who were shooting back. It was frightening, terrifying, since we were the ones who picked the fight. The first few times you fight, you're blind, pulling the trigger without knowing exactly where you're aiming, everything a blur as you operate on habit and instinct. Mistakes get made, and you hope there were enough experienced people to keep the newbies alive long enough to think in the middle of a fight. Eventually, it happened. Eventually, you got used to the adrenaline, enough to be able to think, to make deliberate choices, and to act quickly enough to make it happen. Eventually. Until then, you had to deal with people standing up, screaming and firing until their rifle was empty and continuing to pull the trigger, unaware that they were empty. Then you needed that experienced person nearby to scream, "Reload!" until they obeyed, feeling like you'd torn your throat, but forging ahead anyway, screaming, "Move!" next. Because to not give orders, to not get through to them, could mean their deaths, and you don't need more deaths on your conscience. Slowly, you see reason re-enter their eyes, their emotions becoming more coordinated, careful, and you finally see the enemy down and know that even as you'd kept an eye on your people, you'd also stayed in the fight. Once the last enemy was down, it was short work getting through to the rest of the girls. No, they weren't girls anymore. They were fighters. Maybe not good ones yet, but they deserved to be addressed as such. Eleanor immediately began marshaling the troops, inspecting everyone for injuries, but with everyone on their feet, I wasn't too worried. Fox went racing back to get Dereva and High Tide to bring the trucks up, while the rest of us rolled up our sleeves and got to work, shedding bits of foliage as we did. Sirius took a few people to start hauling away bodies. We'd already found spots where it would be a simple matter to dump the bodies and cave a bank in over them. Some others began sloshing ancient Coca-Cola over the bloodstains and pulling shrapnel out of the trees while I hauled my toolbox out and got to work under the hood. I pursed my lips in a soundless whistle. 50 cal bullets turn engines into a big mess. Seahorse had a nasty cut from a piece of shrapnel, but a quick bandage later and she was on light duties, which meant pouring coke. Jewel had the worst injury because she didn't get her ass down far enough. Eleanor's tweezers didn't have the necessary oomph, so she borrowed a pair of needle-nose pliers and got Phoenix and River to sit on the petite teenager. "Will she be all right?" I asked quietly when I retrieved my pliers. "Honestly, I don't know." Eleanor's mouth was pinched at the corners, her eyebrows furrowed with worry. There are some nerve clusters running through there, and I have no idea exactly where they are. I wish we had a doctor. She turned and glanced at her patient, who was sobbing through the piece of leather clenched between her teeth. As I turned away, Eleanor caught my arm. Wait, you're back! It's fine, I assured her, anxious to get back to the truck. In truth, it hurt like a bitch, but less than my period cramps usually did. The only awkward thing was the feel of blood trickling down my butt and legs. It reminded me of sweat running down my back, only thicker. Just a quick wrap around will do me fine. Not to be dissuaded, Eleanor turned me around and made me lean forward. The only way to stop her would have been to use force, and I couldn't do that to her. You're lucky, she said eventually. An inch closer to the ground and you'd be a paraplegic right now. My back prickled and my heart stuttered. Could you do me a favor and not tell me stuff like that? It freaks me out. There's no way I could have gotten lower. As I spoke, Eleanor passed a bandage around my middle. You're also running through clothing at an alarming rate. Tell me about it. I panted as Eleanor tied it off firmly, finally stopping the warm trickle down my butt. I hate sewing, and it's what I spend all my spare time doing. Properly dismantling an engine takes both time and an OCD amount of organization. This was worse than chop shop work. Every bolt went into a bucket, and I flung parts over my shoulder. Left for trash, right to keep. I heard our trucks pull up, and a moment later Anansi squirmed under the engine, giggling as he went to work. Once the burial crew got back, they began moving supplies from the truck, transferring everything to ours. Dereva, Fox, and High Tide started squirreling the junk in the woods to my left, chatting as they worked. The way everything felt normal but off crashed over me, and the socket wrench fell from my nerveless fingers as my heart juddered and squeezed. I gasped, leaning against the truck, and tried to breathe. Captain, you okay? Anansi's worried face peered up at me. Yeah, I gave him a shaky smile. I'm okay. I just need to eat. He nodded, then moved back to a stubborn bolt. To get back into the spirit of things, so the kid didn't need to worry, I began bemoaning the lack of power tools. In a few minutes, the bitching was genuine as I struggled with a stubborn bolt. The wrench slipped off, scraping my knuckles, and I cussed at the truck, clutching my hand. Some of the girls stopped and listened to my diatribe. They still weren't used to the fact that swearing covered more than just fuck, while Sirius laughed at me. Bitch. The light had hit that murky twilight where the sun settled just below the horizon before I got the engine finished. Sirius argued with the door. Anansi moved to help her, wielding a spanner in a businesslike manner. Here, don't pull on that, he instructed. He moved underneath the hinge. It works better from here. You just... He heaved, sinewy muscles standing out in his lean frame, and the metal groaned. The door sagged awkwardly, one hinge loose. Damn! Sirius stood back, admiring his work. Captain teach you that? No. She just showed me how car hinges are put together. I figured out the rest. Sirius looked at me and I nodded. Once Anansi understood the mechanics of a thing, it didn't take long before he figured out the rest. He said he was better with computers and had never worked on an engine before. Heaven help me. Less than 2 hours later, bloody, grimy, and grinning, we left the area, all signs of our activities wiped away. We, Phoenix announced to the women awkwardly sitting on and over parts, are goddamn awesome! She got a few cheers, some high fives were exchanged, and a single snore ripped through the evening. I twisted awkwardly to see Sirius passed out in the back of my GMC. What a legend. All right, that concludes chapter 24. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I will be back again next week with more. If you enjoyed this, do give a follow and a like. You can ring the bell so you get notified the moment one of these get put up, because I am managing to put them up every week, but I am not putting them up on the same day every week. And that apparently is just a me thing right now. So, cheers. Thanks for being here. If you want to follow, sign up to my newsletter, there's a link down there. You also will get a freebie. Since I don't remember which one it is right now, good luck. Go and click on it to see which series it's going to be.